the miseducation of the Africans is for the African to be made to believe that they were uncivilized, they were savages, and now they have been civilized by the Europeans, and hence they have to pay for that. And again, to be made to feel like they were dependent on the European, whereas it's the other way around. They were dependent on the African colonies in the past. After political liberation, now they are indirectly dependent on Africans.
As you know, there are lots of things happening in Africa. Just good for us, like to share opinions and to really see what is really happening. Because when you watch the media, the news and different things, obviously they bring their own perspective. But it's good for us as Africans, to also share our opinion from what we see. And today we have Mr. Koko Matata, who is a Pan-African, really involved with, the news about Africa, everything that is happening there. He's in he knows about those things. So today he's here to share his opinion about the ASS, the Alliance of the Sahel States. Because recently the news, we heard a lot about, those states. Some people are excited about what they see. Others are, watching, to see how things are evolving. So I'm interested today to hear about what Koko Matata has to tell us. First of all, Koko Matata, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Thank you very much for welcoming me. I'm okay. I hope you're good too.
Well, yes, I'm great, thank you. All good. The weather is not that nice, but it's all happening inside. So yeah, from that perspective, all is well. And like I was saying, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and from a Pan-African perspective, like what do you do?
Thank you very much. I was born in the Kingdom of Lesotho, so you could call me Mosotho, but there is no Mosotho without Africa, and there is no Lesotho without Africa. So I think for those of you who have studied history or geography and can see on the map, Lesotho is ensconced within South Africa, which again is a peculiar situation. As we said, we can discuss that another time. But the way I see things is there are more Basotho who live outside Lesotho than in Lesotho itself. That tells you that there is no Mosotho without African. You have to be an African first before you are Mosotho. And if we start to trace our genealogy, our origin, most of us come from Congo. We come from East Africa. We come from Egypt. We come from Cameroon because we are Bantu. That is where we come from. And in my previous jobs, I traveled a lot. I saw a lot of suffering in Africa, and that sort of touched my heart. And it made me ask why are we the cursed race, if I can call it that. Question of why is Africa so rich and its people so poor? That is what we are trying to correct or trying to talk about and discuss all the time. So just to correct, in your introduction you said, I know a lot. I think I'm asking lots of questions. I'm constantly asking lots of questions. And I think this discussion here should also be a base, a foundation for further discussions. Further, debates about what is happening in Africa. We should not take it lying down. We should not accept that Africans should take the bare bones or nothing at all when the other races get the best out of Africa. That is a problem. That's what we as Pan-Africans are always trying to correct. We want the best for African children. The resources of Africa should, first of all, make sure the children of Africa get the best out of that, which is not happening at the moment. So I'm currently based in England, but I see myself as everywhere. I see myself when I look at my brothers in Kenya struggling for, self-determination, struggling for accountability against their government, which they put it there to do things for them, but it's not doing things for them. It's serving other people. I see myself in my Nigerian brothers who are also struggling the same way. And I see myself in the Congolese brothers in East Congo. Eastern DRC has always been in turmoil. It's a problem which we as Pan-Africans, we have to solve. We do have to solve. We cannot delegate it to someone else or expect outside help. We need to solve it as Pan-Africans. The same for Sudan. It is our country. It is our people who are struggling there. And again, the same for the Sahel States. They have been under attack as long as I can remember, from 2015 onwards. Burkina Faso has been under attack. Mali has been under attack. It's that. And if we go a bit further back, we are talking about Berlin Conference. Berlin Conference, Africa was divided like a piece of cake. Or before Berlin Conference. Berlin Conference was just, to normalize things, or for the conquering countries to come in and say, this is my piece of land, you have to respect it. They already had, split it into different pieces. And some of our brothers continue to want to protect those small pieces of cake which the colonial masters split Africa into, which is unfair. That is what we are trying to fight against. And on the ground, we have a new Pan-African agenda, which is a group. We are trying to come up with a philosophy, ideology, or an economic idea that we can use to liberate Africa. Because Africa, at liberation, they only got political, self-determination. But economic, we are still ruled somewhere else. That is where the problem is. I also work with farmers of thoughts, and under farmers of thoughts, we are looking at governance. So Afrocentric governance systems will be the best way to go, which is what they interrupted. And we still have them on the ground. It's a matter of how do we put them back on the plate again. I also work with a group that studies conscientism. So conscientism is Dr. Nkrumah's philosophy for self-determination. And through that book, you learn a lot as Pan-Africans from what Dr. Nkrumah was saying to us. It's a message for him from beyond the grave. And hopefully people have heard of conscientism and they will look it up. And if they need more, get in touch with you or get in touch with me. Let's talk about this.
Okay, wow. Wow. You know what? You're so inspiring. Like, I was listening and be like, oh, wow. I thought, because when we are in Europe, we feel like all we can do is just watch. But from hearing what you said, you are here in Europe, but you are so active. You are so, you're still trying to get involved with what is happening in Africa, which is amazing. So, if anyone is watching us and feeling like, how can I contribute? I think it's a very good way to get started, to get involved with the organizations that are operating in Africa. We can support them differently. It can be monetarily, sending them some finances, to help them to continue whatever work they're doing, towards the progress of the continent. Because at the end of the day, I mean, we are here today because we all, as African, we want to see things moving forward. Not because for me, like, from my childhood until today, I have the impression that, when you talk about Africa, the first thing that comes to, and it's not just me, but, most people, when you talk about Africa, the first thing that comes to mind is poverty. When that's so wrong, because Africa is far from being poor. For Africa is far from being poor. There's so many things to be done. We have so much, in terms of our lands. The lands hold so much richness. But now it's one thing to have, all the minerals in the world, but it's all about knowing what to do with them and how to exploit them.
Dr. Nkrumah himself said that long time ago. He said, Africa is rich. Africa is not poor. It's the Africans who are poor. That is a problem. And I think
Yeah.
just here at the start of this conversation, we need to make it clear that we were never dependent on the Europeans. So I don't know why we are always saying we got independent. We got independence from them. We need to make a distinction that we
Well,
cannot say we are independent from them as if we were dependent from them. They have always been dependent on us. It's the other way around. We need to make that clear.
I really like that because, like you said, I mean, even if they declared that we are independent, but it's for it's something that has to come from us, because you are independent, but they're still around, taking all our riches, but we are happy because we are independent. I think we need to see more, not just words and not just pieces of papers telling us, oh, okay, you are independent. Will you be happy if you are in prison, but you are
Yeah,
told that you are free? I don't think so. So that's the stage that
absolutely.
Africa is in right now. And today, as I was saying, we are here to talk about the
Yes.
alliance of the Sahel states, which involves Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. So, first of all, Koko Matata, could you tell us a bit more about that alliance and what are your
So,
thoughts about it?
like everyone else, we are hopeful, even optimistic, that the Alliance of the Sahel is the start of something great in Africa, something new. As you know, those states, all of them, are ruled by their military leaders, the military leaders who stood up and said enough was enough. They had to say the time is now for our people to take back control, to take back governance. We know that all of those
Mm-hmm.
countries were under French colonialism. And the French colonialism, as you know, is
Yes.
probably one of the most brutal. So, just to remind people what happened, first of all, they own Haiti. And when Haiti fought for independence in the late 1890s, the late 1790s, let me say that, because Haiti was the first independent black republic in 1805. But what the French did was they blockaded
Mm-hmm.
Haiti and said, if you don't pay us back for loss of what we had, our economic loss, we are going to destroy you. We're
Mm-hmm.
going to destroy you. And Haiti had to pay that back. They had to pay that ransom, which they only finished paying not long ago. And if you look at that, we are talking about trillions, billions of dollars, if not trillions. So having learned how to do that from Haiti, they did the same in Guinea. When other African countries were getting political liberation, I'm going to talk about political liberation just to make sure people understand we don't have independence because we were never dependent, just for me to,
No.
for that to be clear. So the French went to their former or their colonial republics and said, you have to choose two things. You can choose to remain within our bloc, or you can choose to have to be, political liberation and do your own. And Guinea
Yeah.
under Ahmed Sekou Toure chose complete, to severe ties with France completely. But what they then did
Mm-hmm.
was terrible, terrible. They actually blockaded Guinea's economy, destroyed everything that they claimed they had set up. They made example of Guinea to the other uh, colonies, so that the other colonies in the end did not choose to sever ties completely. They then decided to
Mm-hmm.
sign the argument for ongoing colonization. So in a way, France's republics, they never got political liberation. In short, it was smokes. They continue to control them. So until uh,
Yeah.
our generals decided enough was enough. But how did they get there? They got there because there was education. There were Pan-Africans who started to make noise on the ground to say, this is not enough. We cannot continue to pay for being colonized.
When you hear, sorry for cutting you, but when you hear about the whole concept of, the countries that were colonized having to pay back, like who told you to come and colonize us in the first place? So why do we have to pay anything? If there's someone who should be paying here, it's you guys. And I don't know how the leaders, at the time accepted such a thing.
So the answer
to be
is
honest.
in what they did to Guinea. When the leaders saw what they did to Guinea, destroying Guinea's economy and actually sabotaging Guinea's currency and doing everything to terrify the other leaders, they decided, okay, it was safe to sign in with whatever the French were putting on the table. That's to save themselves and continue with their young republics then. That's why they decided to do that.
Yes.
The miseducation of the Africans is for the African to be made to believe that they were uncivilized, they were savages, and now they have been civilized by the Europeans, and hence they have to pay for that. And again, to be made to feel like they were dependent on the European, whereas it's the other way around. The European was directly dependent on the African. They were dependent on the African colonies in the past. After political liberation, now they are indirectly dependent on Africans.
Sorry to cut you. I love your way of seeing things, because obviously these are things that we know. We know that Europeans without Africa, they won't be where they are today. Especially like like France and Great Britain and all that.
America,
without the Africa and
through slavery.
Yes, of course. Yes. Exactly. I mean, those were just examples among others, but obviously, yes, most, of those Western powers, obviously, they enriched themselves using Africa. So, what really struck me, when you were saying that we were never dependent. For you to become independent, you have to be dependent in the first place. Yes. And the fact that, you highlighted it like that, I'm like, oh, wow, that's true. And the term independence in itself, like, now you are independent because you used to be dependent. You were depending on us. So now you are independent. Let's see what you can do. So we are independent, but still, under their control. So, like it's the whole term, the whole terminology that they use is just ridiculous when you start analyzing it that way. So thank you for opening our eyes.
Absolutely.
In that respect.
As I said, I'm always asking questions like everyone else. We are students. There is something to learn every day. I also learn from others of my brothers.
Yeah.
Acknowledge them. So the Sahel kings and the queens decided, you know what? Enough is enough. Because there was security issues, and these security issues, they were not being addressed. But instead, these security issues, they were being used as Trojan horses. They put security issues in the Sahel, and then they brought in the militarization of France, militarization of the United States or United Nations, just to make sure their presence continues to go in those countries, whereas the security situation was not improving. That was what is happening. And
exactly,
the kings had to say, no, enough is enough. But thanks to the Pan-African brothers and sisters, Natalie Yom, they are talking about Kemi Saba, they're talking about, there are many. There's that Cameroon brother who is doing really well as well. I have to give them credit where credit is due, because they are the ones who have sensitized people, raised awareness in the people. And even the army, the people are, they are the people, they are part of the people. Hence, they had to take over. And lots of people said, we're speaking negatively against this coup. But think I have to use the
Mm-hmm.
words of Dr. African, chihombori-quao, who said these people were experiencing coups every day under the French colonialism, the ongoing colonialism under French. They were experiencing
Yes.
coups every day. The CFA itself is a coup against the people's objectives and dreams. So it had to happen. It had to happen. And just to close that question off is to quote what we get from Dr. Nkrumah's
Mm-hmm.
conscientism book. Again, and there is a Greek philosopher who's called Heraclitus, and he observed that the
Mm-hmm.
world is a constant friction. There are always more than one side, opposing side, and friction all the time. So there is no
Mm-hmm.
constant in the world. The question is whether it's a revolution or a reform that will come in place. The reform is there to sort of make sure things don't come to the surface, that conflict doesn't break abruptly. Whereas with the revolution, it has to happen abruptly, which is what the alliance of the
Mm-hmm.
Sahel did. It's a
Yeah.
revolution by the people. In this case, their armies took over and protected their people.
And in terms of that, what do you think is the future of that alliance? Do you think, because right now I have the impression that, the West, obviously they are trying to destabilize, by, you know, any means they can. But do you think that they will still be like that, watching what is happening without doing anything, concrete to stop what is, that revolution, because you call this revolution? And I agree with you because that's something that we never, myself, I never saw, any, I mean, we know lots of African leaders, and none of those leaders ever stood like that, to say, okay, enough is enough. This is our land. These are our riches, and we're going to take those, in our own control. We're going to be responsible for our, own people and do things according to our will. We're not going to be, subject to your whatever, basically, you're not going to tell us what to do. We never saw that before. I personally, I don't know if some people did,
Mm.
but after Sankara, I don't think that any leaders ever came, as clearly as, someone like Ibrahim Traore is doing right now, because he says what he has in his heart. And that, I think, is something that Africa clearly needs. But do you think that there's a future to that revolution? Do you think that there will be other countries joining the alliance, or what do you think will happen in the near
So I
future,
think in the
basically?
beginning, when you asked me the question of what I think, I said I was optimistic. Optimistic means, wishful thinking, hoping for the best is what we can say. But
Mm-hmm.
let's go back again to Heraclitus in conscientism. We are saying the world is constantly at friction. There are always two opposing sides, the evil versus the good. So after
Mm-hmm.
liberation in the 60s, we started seeing some of our leaders being toppled. One of those notable is Sylvanus Olympus in Togo. Olympus wanted to go the way that Ahmed Sekou Toure had gone in Guinea. He wanted independence, complete self-determination for Togo,
Mm-hmm.
but they used um, the Yadema to kill him, in short. So that's a counter-revolutionary, uh, you know, counter-revolution happening. So instead of Togo
Mm-hmm.
getting liberation, self-determination, a say in what they want, Yadema pulled them back into the fold under the French influence again. So amongst us as Africans, there are those who want the best for the people, and then there are those who want the best for themselves and their colonial masters. So what we are hopeful for now is that the counter-revolutionaries don't come in for Ibrahim Traore, Abdurrahman Chani, and our Malian brother, Assimi Goita, because there is always that risk
Good.
that
Yeah.
the counter-revolutionaries will always be there to fight, to pull us back into the mud. You know what I mean? They are those who are always willing to sell their souls. There are those of us who go into government to enrich themselves. There are those who live on corruption, and that corruption is everywhere. It's from the moment you agree to assist the counter-revolution against what the Alliance of the Sahel is doing for its own. And I think in his speech, Ibrahim Traore mentioned the triangle, three forces. There is the empire of the good, the empire of the evil,
Yes.
and then the empire of the slaves, which is us. He said that some of us will be happy to be used against us, our own good. The momentum is now shifting in the Sahel. We are wishing all of Africa could be like that. We could be, self-determining. We can choose what we want. We can have the leaders who the people love. But unfortunately, there will always be someone who is easily bought for $1 million, $1 billion here and there, and then they are willing to, sacrifice themselves, sell their soul, bring their tribe, their ethnicity, divide them rule. They are always going to divide us and rule us, which is what we have to guard against. When the revolution was happening, lots of Africans were saying, why is the African Union not supporting this? Because these kings and queens are fighting against the colonial, imperialism, French domination. But and even ECOWAS surprised everyone else by their hostility towards alliance. So let me tell you why this will happen. It's because supporting them is going to signal to their military officers that they can also topple them. Hence why we want by all means to subjugate these kings and make sure they come back into ECOWAS.
Let's talk a little bit about that, the ECOWAS. Do you think the decision of the alliance of the Sahel states to leave the ECOWAS was a good one? Do you think it was a good thing for them?
It was time for them. And they acted decisively because ECOWAS was not going anywhere. It's never easy to discuss everything just from the lenses of the now and the immediate now, because all of this stuff they go back. If they go as far back to Berlin Conference. If not Berlin Conference, then let's talk about when we got political liberation in the 60s. Dr. Nkrumah was the one who was advocating for unity now. But most of the others, they resisted that. They opposed him. And one of those was Julius Kambarage Nyerere. May his soul rest in peace too. He wanted the best for Africa. But in the end, we got the African Union, which was a compromise of unity now with a gradual unity. Then, with the gradual unity being proposed, it's meant that the regional bodies will be used to build the super groupings within the region. And then when those regional groups were ready, then they would bring them all together from African unity. That was what was agreed in 1963. And Agenda 2063 is also a vehicle, a channel towards that gradual coming together, gradual unity. But the alliance of the Sahel realized that ECOWAS was being compromised by the French coming in and telling them what to do, what not to do, and then them continuing to pay into the Bank de France, the amount of money they have to pay to for the CFA to control.
We need
Yes,
to talk about these things because for a long time we used to rely on the media to tell us what is happening everywhere. Basically, they were putting ideas into
yes,
our minds. And today with the internet, like, we have the option to either for still listen to what they're saying, or go and look for alternative opinions and see what else people have to say about the same topics that sometimes they don't even
absolutely.
cover. You see, so that's why basically I started this podcast, because I just want to hear different opinions. And Africa being, like, our homeland, we have to, when we see something like what is happening in the the Sahel states, I think we need to be with them. I cannot even say behind them, because behind is like you are just following, but we have to be with them. Obviously, we cannot be with them physically, but we can be with them, in having discussions like this, to show that, okay, what is happening according to the media, it's, those are coups, we have to criticize
Yes,
them, we have to get rid of them. But actually, they are there, and they are, what I love about it, is
yes,
that they are all young people, they're in our generations, and they are seeing things from our perspective. They are seeing, we have all the same dreams. We want to see Africa move, we want to see Africa be great again, because in their history books, there's no traces of Africa having, that central. Obviously, they talk about Egypt, but even there, the it's arguably, we know what has been done, that they don't bring that the history of Egypt the way they should. Lots of things have been removed, and lots of people have been whitened and all of that. But that's another story. But today, it's just very important for us to be supportive about what is happening there. The media can say, okay, we are, what is happening in Sahel is just, it's not democratic. Democratic? The democracy has been there for a long time, and we don't see its traces. We don't see it. It doesn't bring anything to our people. So is really democracy the way forward for Africa? I don't know. I mean, I prefer to see, to be honest with you, a young person who sees who has been, who saw the reality of what is happening in Africa, what has been happening since the
mhm,
independence of of our countries. And when we look at, all of those years until today, we don't see anything happening. So at the end of the day, it's up for us to stand up and be like, enough is enough. Maybe it's time for us to try different ways of doing things. Maybe that democracy is just for them. We have to find our own definition of democracy, whatever
I'm so happy
democracy
to you
means for
say that.
Africa.
That gladdens my heart because you're speaking like an African queen.
Oh,
Um, they always say democracy came from, or in fact, they say it came from Greece. But don't forget where the Greeks studied. The Greeks studied in Kemet. They studied in
mm,
everything that
exactly.
the Greeks taught the Europeans is a plagiarized version of what was happening in Kemet, what the Africans taught them. So
Yes.
with democracy, democracy is one man, one vote. And with that one man, one vote, we are always in 4 year time or 5 years time going in and choosing the people to represent us. But what the African system of governance was doing, every man had a say in how we were ruled, how our governance happened. It's still happening in some of our villages.
Hmm.
Every man, every grown man can say, this is how I want things to happen. And we were on
Yes.
consensus, whereas democracy works on competition. It's whoever shouts the highest, shouts the loudest, who gets
Hmm.
whatever they want to get.
Yes.
And unfortunately, the system that they are using now is susceptible to compromise because the corporates in the West, mostly the multinationals, they can buy their candidates and choose who has to be in power, who doesn't be in power. If you don't want to
Mm-hmm.
be, they don't want you to be in power. It's that you cannot be in power even how good you are. Let's take the case of Jeremy Corbyn here in this country. Was Jeremy Corbyn that bad? Was he that bad?
Mm.
Was he
Yeah.
Western Boris Johnson? I doubt. Boris Johnson was a joker, but instead the media picked who was supposed to be the leader of this country. It's the same with democracy. Democracy is weak as a system of governance and is corrupt. They choose who they want to rule as those with the money. The people don't have a say in the end. Let's take the case of the marches against in the free Palestine in this country. Lots of people went out to demonstrate in London, in Washington, everywhere. Did their people, the government, react to them? They did not. If democracy worked for the people, then they should have. But it doesn't, unfortunately. And it's the same with what was happening in the ECOWAS. ECOWAS was saying promote
Mm-hmm.
democracy. But then the Sahel was saying we have been doing this for a while. It's not helping. We have been
Yes.
paying funds. We don't seem to be finishing paying funds. The French are getting richer, the Africans are getting poorer. The French are safe,
Mm-hmm.
the Africans have to face these security issues that they face in the jihadist attacks which are happening, and it has happened just yesterday in Burkina Faso. 140 people killed. So, and
Oh, I
it
didn't
has
hear
happened
about that.
again. The people who were defending their villages, digging trenches, were killed by the jihadists in Burkina Faso. And ECOWAS, instead of supporting these states' fight against insurgency, instead they are sitting there, which leaves the question of are they also in cahoots with whoever the insurgents are? So the Alliance of the Sahel, they had to take an action. Ibrahim Traore was a second coup to remove Paul Henry, Damiba Sandaogo. If you remember, it didn't
Mm-hmm.
work after Sandaogo came in power. They had to remove him as well. And they had to risk breaking
Yes.
some of the conventions or the standards of code which ECOWAS had put in place for its members that they have to practice democracy. And again, that democracy is being prescribed from the West. What is African?
Mm-hmm.
What works for the African is what works for someone else. So that is how it was. It was inevitable that this will happen. And with proper education, the leaders eventually took over what was rightfully theirs. Let's not forget. Let's not forget. This has to be clear.
Yes.
Governance is for the people. Is for the people. The people hold the sovereignty. They hold the mandate. We give the leaders the mandate to implement what we want as the people. But unfortunately, once they get into
Mm-hmm.
power, they choose to do whatever they want for either themselves or for
Yes.
sponsors. A handful of sponsors. They get the interests. They get
Mm-hmm.
the mining rights. All different things that they paid some of these candidates before they came into power. But what happened to the people? So again, democracy is a Trojan horse. So it's just being used to exploit the people.
Yes, definitely. Because I do believe that, obviously I'm not here sitting here saying, oh, actually we want some dictators to, to be ruling the people and, oppressing. But I think, when we're talking about democracy, we should actually, analyze what is happening. We cannot talk about the same democracy in France and try to bring that democracy into an African country, because in France they have their own values, their own traditions, and cultures, and etc. So they made a democracy that that go hand in hand with all of those things. Now they want to bring the same things, to Africa. Okay, you have to do things exactly the way we do. But as Africans, we are not savages the way they like to believe. Before they arrived, we had our ancestors who already had their own systems, and the system were not oppressive. Obviously, if someone does something, they also had their own like punishment, something to make sure that the community is structured and the society is working properly. But wanting the same democracy as in France to be in Burkina Faso is just a joke. We have to say it. It's a joke. Obviously, power to the people every single day. That's what we want. But was it true, during all those years when they had their puppets there? Do we really have a democracy? No. Today, what we're seeing, we see obviously it's still, early years for the system that, Ibrahim Traore and his government are trying to install. But, at least we see something concrete being built. And I think, a democracy, and when we talk about democracy as well, we see the people supporting the government in place. They are being called, oh, they are not official. They are not official, but they are official for the people because the people are seeing that they are actually there, for their own interest, for the interest of the people. So for me, that's already democracy. What do you want? Democracy doesn't have to be your ways. The way you define democracy doesn't have to be my way. Obviously the basis have to be the same, but we don't have to follow exactly what you're doing in your own country. And I respect what I see Ibrahim Traore doing, because he doesn't shy away from saying what he stands for. And he stands from the African traditions, the traditions of our ancestors, because they had values. And with the colonization, with slavery and all that, those values have been somehow lost, in that process. But it's never too late to go back to those values, because those values made who we are today. Obviously we had the history, like I said, colonization and slavery that came and brought havoc in our continent, but we can still build again. It's never too late.
You said I should come here and talk about what I know. But I think you know
I told
a
you
lot
it was going to be a chat.
you know a lot more than you let on, Queen. I mean,
Well, I mean, like I think I'm just like
yeah,
yourself. I love to research, because at the end of the day, you can just sit in our corner.
yeah,
I'm here with my family. We are comfortable, and that's all that matters. Or we can be like, okay, I have a bit of comfort here, but we also need to think about the people in our continent who are suffering every single day, who live in insecurity, who would love to enjoy whatever we have here. And it would be nice to be here and feel like, okay, I'm going back to Africa without having to think about insecurity, or jihadists or whatever
yeah,
they put in there to scare us. So that's why we need to research, and we try to find out about history. They've been
mhm,
trying to hide
mhm,
our history for a long time, but with time things are just resurfacing. And it's also our duty as people, as Africans, to go and look for those hidden truths about who we are, because we are great as a people. But slavery and colonization, as especially for our generation, what all we see,
mhm,
for instance, let's take my example. I went to university to study,
mhm,
English, civilization, and literature. And when we're talking about civilization, each time that we'll be talking about Africa, it will be, to talk about the slavery and, all the bad things that go with it. So as an African, I used to ask myself, like, is there anything great about Africa, really? So that's where where I was like, okay, maybe all the questions that I'm asking myself, the answers, I'm not going to get them here in the educational system. I have to go and look for that myself in books that are not that accessible in universities, for instance. So that's why I'm so passionate to discuss topics like that with people like you, who are also in the same in the same process, because at the end of the day we all want the same thing. We want
excellent,
Africa to develop. That's the
excellent.
bottom line.
I think the path you're working on is what Dr. Chancellor Williams worked on. when he decided to write The Destruction of Black Civilization. So if you haven't read that, The
Could you say the
Destruction
title
of
again?
Black Civilization, I will send that title to you. Don't worry.
Okay.
He had to do this research
Yes,
himself
please.
and find out how African history was whitewashed. African history has been whitewashed or hidden from the Africans. That's point number one. Point number two, when they came here with colonization had three motives. Three. One of them was civilization, because they said we were uncivilized and they had to civilize us. And you tell me, what does civilization means? You know, you go as an African, you know where we are coming from. Civilization to me doesn't mean having trendy goods, trendy stuff. You have to civilize yourself first before you can civilize it. You change yourself first. And we had Ubuntu. And with Ubuntu, it shows that we were civilized people. That's point number one. Point number two was,
of course,
they were looking at commercialization. The Europeans, anything that they find, if they can't find a way to commercialize it, then it's not it. For them, they had to commercialize everything in Africa. I'll give you a small example of the kingdom where I come from. We are a small country surrounded completely by South Africa. Our people, because it's so cold, we wear blankets. I don't have one here. I will have shown you.
What a shame.
I
Next
can bring
time.
one. If you give me
Oh, yes, please. That would be nice. Yes. Yes, I mean, I'm really enjoying this discussion. Like I was saying, if you're watching this because you're curious about Africa or about, the Sahel states, because you heard so many things about, the alliance of the Sahel state in the news. I mean, we have to find ourselves. We have to go back to, our history and know our roots. Anyway, our brother is back, so let's have a look. Oh, wow. Wow. That's so
these are the Basotho
beautiful.
blankets. These are the Basotho blankets.
Okay.
These are the traditional blankets that Basotho wear.
Wow. Okay.
That's me as a Basotho man. Ooh, heated.
Okay. I mean, how come? Is it cold? I mean, just
It's
why
very
the
cold in
blanket? Is it
Lesotho. We
cold
have snow
there? Like,
in the winter. Yes.
ah,
So back to what I was saying. We
okay.
do have these blankets, but these blankets, which are our national pride, we are unfortunately importing them. Someone
That
else
was
is
going to be
doing
my question.
this for the Basotho people and making a lot of money. The Basotho are not
Of course.
benefiting as much for this, which is their brand. That's commercialization. So we did, of course, have blankets made out of cow skin, mostly, but then they came in and saw an opportunity. They bought this one. This is more hair, mostly from the sheep, goat hair. It was
Yes.
done in England and then shipped back into Lesotho. It's a commercialization. So that is how the
Yes.
missionaries came in and also saw that in Africa and brought in with them the traders. Then we talked about civilization. Civilization also included education. And that education, don't forget, we talked about it. You said it's a low grade education. It's not an education meant to help the African help himself. It's meant for the African to continue to be subservient to the European. It's meant for the African to continue to run the system which was meant to benefit the European. is when you call civilization.
Yes.
So me and you now, we don't dress whatever we used to be African. We now have to wear stuff that look European. So in short, we are now Europeans with black skins. And you tell me that we are now civilized because we have let go of what we used to use, now have embraced other people's cultures, have embraced other people's ways, clothes, everything. Now we are civilized. It's a lot of stuff which we can point out. But the other part was religion. Religion has again been used as a tool to make sure that we oblige. We oblige, we let go of our culture, we actually see them as our brothers than our own brothers and sisters. Because after Berlin Conference, Lesotho is now there, South Africa is around Lesotho. The Basotho are foreigners in South Africa.
I mean, could you briefly tell us why?
That is a long story, but what I can say is that the British came in, no, the Dutch came in, settled in the Cape. The British came in, pushed them inwards. The Dutch came in. We had battles with the Dutch. We lost a lot of land to the Dutch. And then in the end, we asked the British for protection. The British also wanted to impose their own things on us. We fought against the British and won. But at the end of the day, we stayed with what we have. But some of the lands which we had were lost to South Africa. So which means lots of Basotho people are in South Africa. They don't call themselves, they call themselves Basotho, but of South Africa. So we do have an abnormality where you have a nation is there, but most of these people are outside in another one. And so in short, we have two countries.
Yeah.
One nation, but two countries. It's a one nation, but two countries. So not just that, Botswana lost lots of land to South Africa, the South African project, because South Africa is a union of different then provinces or nations. Before it was Natal and Cape were British, and then Transvaal, which is mostly Gauteng presently, as an Orange Free State, they were the Boer republics. They were owned by the Dutch people at the time. And then further north, which used to be Botswana, was part of the lands which was lost from my brothers in Botswana. And what is called Mpumalanga is mostly of the land which was lost by the Swazi people. So now they have only Eswatini, a small tiny dot like that between Mozambique and South Africa. But if you carry a Swaziland passport, a Swatini passport, you are a foreigner in South Africa. If you carry a Botswana passport, you cannot work in South Africa. You can come in, maybe visit for a month, but go back. If they find you have overstayed your visa, they can send you to prison or destroy your passport. So that is how we have happened as Africans. And then we have all these regional groupings that are supposed to be working together towards one Africa, maybe in 2063. But until that time happens, each and every one of these countries can do anything they want. That means the African Union will take a long time to actualize, to happen, because it's against the interests of Ramaphosa being a leader in his own country, in South Africa, longer. You understand? The minute Ramaphosa signed AU into law, become now there's a supranational body over South Africa. Ramaphosa doesn't have that much power now to control what he wants in South Africa. Maybe the AU can tell him what to do. So as long as the AU that we have is a watered down dog without teeth, we are not going anywhere. We are not going anywhere. And then again, there is that element of a boys' club. If it's just a boys' club where all of these leaders, regardless of how they got into power, go and just pat themselves on the back and not do anything about proper unity or progress in Africa, that's where we are going. And I think ECOWAS was worse. That's why the alliance of the Sahel decided we are going out and we are staying out. We are not going back.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's really an interesting way to see things. And regarding ECOWAS, to be honest with you, because I did ask you the question, I think it was in the middle of the interview. And I just think, at some point, we have all those organizations that, when you read their description, what they are supposed to do for Africa and for the countries that are within those organizations, this sounds like, really important things, and like organizations that
Mhm.
have meaning for Africa. But when you look at ECOWAS today, they are just it's just an meaningless organization, because you said that with what happened in Burkina Faso, they didn't say a word about that. But am I really surprised? No, because even the countries that are within the ECOWAS today, even if if something happens in those countries, you don't hear anyone from ECOWAS saying a thing. You see? So they are just, puppet organizations that the West uses, however they want, basically. Like, they tried to use ECOWAS to get into, to attack the Sahel states and all that. But I think today, because now, with the Sahel states, if it was just one country, I
Yes.
think they'll be already gone.
Yes.
If it was just one coup, they would have they would have came with their puppets and replaced him quickly. But because they are three
Yes.
and they have had that idea of
Yes.
uniting under just one alliance, I think that definitely makes things a bit trickier for the West to
Absolutely.
attack three countries at
Absolutely.
the same time, to be honest. And also nowadays, the I think Africans, little by little, people are opening their eyes,
Mhm.
people are awakening to the reality, because for a long time, Europeans or whatever, they will be dictating
Mhm.
whatever
Mhm.
information they want Africans to see and hear. It was the radio, it was the TV, and of course they control
Yeah.
the TV and radio. But with the internet today, we go on Twitter and you have people who actually are standing
Correct.
for the truth.
Correct.
They want the truth to
Correct.
prevail. So instead of just following all those fake
Mhm.
news, because
Yeah.
they love that fake news. But when you listen to their news, isn't that
Mhm.
fake when you don't report everything as it
I,
happened?
I find it hard
Anyway.
now to watch and believe what I hear from the Western media. Not just that, they rarely report what's happening in Africa. If you want real stories of what is happening in Africa, you need to talk to the people. You need to get into the people. Find ways in which you can get down to the proper information. But there's something I want us to go back to, in which we said um, before the Europeans came, the Africans were already there doing stuff their own way. You probably have heard about the Manden Charter. Manden Charter.
Could you say that again?
Yeah,
I never heard
Manden
about it.
Charter
Please
was signed
enlighten us.
under the I think it was it the Mali Empire then, but it's the Mandinga people.
Mm.
So it's a governance, it's a charter which shows what we intend to do, how we intend to do all of these things. And it was signed by the people. I think it was at a place called Furu. Um, so Manden Charter, if you look for Manden Charter, you will find where it was signed. It usually takes place
Yes,
for
I
that,
look
where
for
it
it.
was signed. It predates uh, the, the British. The British, they don't have a constitution. They don't have a constitution because they have their
Hmm.
own written charter, which was done, I think, after 1066. I think the mandate is much older than that.
Okay.
The people had their own ways. As I said, we also had Ubuntu, and we practice Ubuntu up to today. And through Ubuntu, we also have a governance in which we say a chief or a queen is only a queen by the will of his or her people. It just derives from Ubuntu. Ubuntu has I am because we are. It's just to show that
Yes.
the Africans, socially and politically, we were much, much more advanced and developed than those people who came in and thought they were going to develop.
My husband, when he talks about, you know, the history of Africa according
Mhm.
to, the history book, what he says is that, we basically, let's see, if for instance, the hunter, when the hunter goes
Mhm.
to hunt, let's say a lion, and he comes back, whether he comes back with the lion or not, he's going to make up his own story. And in that story, given that
Mhm.
he is the one who tells the story, he's going to big himself up. Yes, sir. You could, if you were there, I did this to the lion and this. He's going to picture himself as being the bravest of them all. You see? But he said, now picture the lion telling the same story to, if it was the lion that was telling the story, it will be very, very different. Because obviously the lion will say, the story from its own perspective, and it will be a very different perspective. That's why he said the history books that we're reading today, they are books that were written by white people predominantly. We have to say things how they are. They were written by the white people according to their perspective. So they are showing their perspective. And when you look into those stories to find yourself as an African, you will never, you'll never find yourself. You'll only lose yourself because they are going to, for me, myself growing up, I used to, I grew
Mhm.
up in a French department. Basically, to till this day,
Mhm.
my country, which is called Mayotte, is still French. And in our schools, we are not told about our own history. We are not told about our own history, regarding our ancestors and all that.
Mhm.
We learn about Charlemagne, Napoleon, all their great people, but no words is being said about our kings and our history prior to the arrival of the French people. We don't know anything about that. So me growing up as a little girl, I was already very curious, like, okay, I'm reading about all these great people, good for them. But where are my people? When I look at my skin and I look at the skin of these people, it's not the same thing. Where are, my heroes? As my heroes, my ancestors, where are they? Obviously, they were not in the books. And it was only growing up that I was like, okay, you know, I wasn't told about my history like in the history books. Now I can go and look for all those, answers myself. So, that's how basically it's all started with me. It's, by not by seeing that very big gap in the history book, and seeing that history that was not really reflecting me as a person, as an African, you see. So as people, we cannot go on like this, because if we continue in the same way, like we've been doing until today, our kids, our grandkids, they are going to be worse. They are going to be more alienated than we are today. And that's exactly the agenda of the West. That's what they want. Because when you're alienated, you don't know who you are. It's easy to manipulate you. It's easy to put ideas, that you don't really agree with, but you don't know who you are, so you just follow. So it's our duty today. Enough is enough, because we can always sit here, victimize, oh, they did this to us, or they did that to us, or it's because of corruption. At the end of the day, we need to take things into our own hands now. You see, I want to learn about Africa. Then go. There are lots of things. like historians, even when at the time of like you were talking about that Greek, I forgot his name,
Yes,
the Greek historian. Yes, even as ancient as that time, we find people, Greek people who were writing about Africa, and you'll be surprised because that what they are saying, they're not talking about savages. They're talking about going to Africa and being
absolutely,
impressed about what they found.
absolutely.
So yes, so
Yeah,
it's we have to wake up
yeah,
and be like, oh, okay. Because for me, I used to think that there was nothing great about Africa, but obviously, after a lot of years of research, I was mistaken, and I'm happy to find out about that. So it's our duty to
yes.
to, to do that research.
Pythagoras' theorem is based on triangles, and the Egyptians built the pyramids as far back as thousands of years before Christ. That's a long time ago.
Hmm.
It's before Pythagoras.
Yeah,
If they didn't have Pythagoras, how did they achieve that? If they say Pythagoras is the one who came up with that theorem, that is a problem with the European system. The European system always has to have a name to someone. Yes, but
hmm.
unfortunately,
Oh
we as
yeah,
Africans, we give a lot. We give a lot to the world. We continue to give a lot to the world up to today. With no name, with no name. The Africans were building pyramids before Pythagoras was born. If they didn't have Pythagoras' theorem, how did they manage that? That's something we need to ask ourselves all the time. I'm glad you're asking yourself all of these questions, and I encourage you, if you haven't read Fanon, to go read Fanon. White
oh my God, he was like the
man.
first one that I read. I'm glad you mentioned him, and you know what? Maybe one day we can, we can
I think
organize something just
we
to
need
talk about, his
to
book.
you know
Yes,
on his birthday or something talk about Fanon because he has given so much to us. And for those of us who are really reading him, we can find our liberation. Our elders have already left marks on the
definitely.
sand for us to follow. It's for us to find them. Another man who did the same thing you were
Exactly.
doing was Dr. John Henry Clark. He was asking himself the same questions you are asking
Okay.
and not finding himself or people who look like him in the books. He had to go
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
find out himself. And if you follow Dr. John Henry Clark, you will find a lot of wealth. So, Dr. John Henry Clark, Dr. Chancellor
Okay.
Williams, and then there is that other eminent professor who wrote The Miseducation of the Negro. There are,
I
there
heard. I think I heard
are
about the
lots of
title,
them.
but I'm not
I'm
sure who
happy
wrote it.
to help you with a link of all of this. So your library is stocked, well stocked. So we know what is right. We need to unlearn
Mm,
all the poison we have ingested and relearn what is right
exactly.
because it's important. So again, when we're talking
Mm,
about Mandan Charter was signed or agreed at a place called Kurukan Fuga. So if you can't find Mandan Charter, search for
okay.
Kurukan Fuga, you'll find it. It was the basis of the Malinke people in West Africa. And
Mm-hmm.
as I said, for us in Southern Africa, Ubuntu was is the core of our principle. And then in West Africa, they also have Sankofa. Sankofa is going back, searching for, where you lost your way. They always say, look where you sleep. You slipped and fell. Not where you fell. Look where you slipped and fell. Not where you fell. That's
Mm,
what we have not been doing as Africans, looking where
yeah.
we sleep and then correcting them. By whitewashing our
Mm-hmm.
education, you reminded me of Dr. Nkrumah himself. Dr. Nkrumah has written about 9 books. No other head of state has done that. No one. No one. And I think Sankara learned a lot from Dr. Nkrumah. lots and lots of other younger generation. They learned a lot from Dr. Nkrumah, those who were willing to listen. But unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
there is a book here which was written by Winston Rodney, no, Walter Rodney. Dr. Walter Rodney, who was born in, I think, Guyana, but was living in Jamaica when he was, because he wasn't doing what they expected him to do. When he went to Canada, he found that Jamaica was no longer welcoming him. He wrote a book called How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. And in that book, he shows how they managed to put the purpose that they have in power now is through that same education. Education they gave our leaders,
Mm-hmm.
who ended up being our leaders, was meant to be, self-serving the Europeans, self-serving for the Europeans, and destructive for the Africans. So we need to reread again. We need to reread. And I'm glad the Alliance of the
Mm-hmm.
Sahel are doing that. So you asked me about the Basiru
Yes.
fight, Diomaye fight. Yeah,
Yes, please.
to be
What are
honest,
your
it's
thoughts about
very
it?
early days. It's very early days. We expected so much from him when he was elected president
Mm.
and came in with his two queens. And we were saying, here's a man who's doing things his own way. And he espoused Pan-Africanism.
Yeah.
And he was saying, yeah, we are going to see things. But he has been caught up in the ECOWAS ways of doing things. And he has been caught up in government. So for now, we haven't seen anything as Africans showing what Pan-African is about. Because the French, they continue to have military bases in Senegal. And the French still have a lot of influence in Senegal. And he has been to France three times already since he has been in power. So I don't know. I don't know what's happening. Lots of us are asking ourselves, what's happening between Faye, what's happening with Usman Songo. But at least Usman Songo has been talking to the ASS kings. So we are hoping they can influence him and then they can bring Senegal over. Because the way it is, the
Mm.
ASS doesn't have any access to sea. But if they bring Senegal in, or Senegal give them that access to sea, we will have a state that's more stable, more self sufficient. But so far, we have heard that Algeria is willing to help them with that access to sea, because ECOWAS has not been welcoming to them, has been hostile to them, but Algeria has come to their help and is willing to work to that end. But if Bassirou Diomaye Faye, Usman Sonko, his prime minister, help the ASS things, we have, a state there which will be more stable, more, forward-looking, progressive for the Africans. But so far, I think
Mm.
Diomaye Faye is still stuck in the current machinations of imperialism. He finds it hard to extricate himself and show who his true self, who he is. We, we as Pan-Africans, we are not sure. Some of us are saying he sold out already, but some of us, we are willing to give him some time to see how he does things. But the people who have shown us their cards are the alliance of Sahel States. We know where they stand.
Yes. I mean, regarding Bassirou
Yeah.
Diomaye Faye, let's just say the Senegalese president, you know, when he came to power, like you said, we're all so excited because of what they were saying. They were
Mm.
elected by the Senegalese for a reason, because they came out with that very strong
Yes.
Pan-African discourse that won everyone in Senegal and also in diaspora, and even us as Africans were watching, and all of us were like, oh, we can't
Mm-hmm.
wait to see that guy in power. And today he's here. Lots of people say, oh, it's still early days. It's still early days. well, that's when we should be seeing some traces of how, his mandate is going to look like
Mhm.
in 2 3 years time. But right now the guy is just following,
Mhm.
he's trying to be neutral. And I think with neutrality you can't win. You are either offensive or you are,
Defense.
receiving blows. You cannot be
Yeah.
neutral and win a war, because Africa
It
is
is.
in war today. This is when with Pan-Africanism, we are fighting ideologies that
Mhm.
brainwashed our people. So when you come, you are
Mhm.
either Pan-African or you're not. Don't pretend that you're Pan-African and then you come to power and you are trying to be like in the middle. You are, playing just,
Yeah.
neutrality. I don't think that will take us anywhere. So for me, I think we've seen the best of him, to be honest with you. I love to be hopeful and
Mhm.
to be like, oh, he's
Mhm.
going to be great and all of that. But the guy, I'm not saying that he's sold out, but he's just not
No.
he's not showing us all that rage, all the power, all the
Yes.
will to change things. Today that he's here, he's trying to be
Yes.
neutral, to play another game. And I don't think that that game is going to
No.
lead him, very
Absolutely.
far.
Yeah.
Anyway, you know what? With this discussion, we can be talking forever because I'm very passionate about this. You are
I can
passionate
see
about this, so we
that.
can go on
That
forever.
yes.
But so I think that we definitely should have like a part two of this, to
Yes.
come and talk again about Africa, because this is how, by sharing ideas, your
Yes.
ideas, and I'm telling you about my ideas. That's how we can build a society. That's how we can build something. But if each one of us has their own ideas and we stay in our corners, nothing can come out of that. It's by coming together that we can build something. So I'd love, to have you back for us to chat again about Pan-Africanism and how, how we can change things in Africa. Because at the end of the day, we think about change in Africa as something that other people are coming to bring to Africa. Never. That will never happen. Don't wait for someone else to bring change to your own country. We have to be that change.
Mhm.
We as the young generation, we have to bring that change.
Absolutely.
That's the reality.
Um, I can't tell you how grateful I am for this moment. And again, I always encourage our sisters to, take the baton, lead. I mean, everyone is a leader in themselves. You don't have to look out for someone to come and inspire you. You yourself are a leader. And I think what you are doing here is encouraging. I am very happy to see a
Yeah,
sister showing by example, leading by example is what we need. Um, we always hear
yeah.
about Marcus Garvey. And Marcus Garvey did a lot of things and with nothing to show, with no formal education, not many degrees or whatever, but he achieved a lot because he had a very strong support of ladies. He had his first wife
Oh,
and then his second wife.
I was not
I am telling
expecting
you,
that.
and those women of Unia, Unia was his movement. There were women of the Unia who were doing a lot. So I would like to encourage you to
Okay.
continue doing it. And I also have some ladies I would like to introduce you when the time is right. And then the two of you,
Oh,
I mean,
yes,
all of you, you
please.
don't you don't feel so lonely. It's good when you find people of a similar mindset to you, and you sort of start bouncing ideas around. It
Definitely.
helps, right? Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. Well, thank you so much. That's so encouraging because I just started, and when you don't see any traces of any influence, you're like, oh, okay, is this really worth it? But I do believe that we
Yes.
all have something to say. We all have ideas, and today we have the platforms to share those ideas. So if you have ideas, if you're watching this, you have lots of things that you'd love to share. Don't just sit on your corner. Come join us. Take your camera, speak up. There will always be people who would love to hear what you have to say. So it's high time that, we come up and instead of just sitting and waiting for other people to come and make a difference, Let's be that difference. Like you said, women as well, we have our voice, because right now most leaders are male. But when we look at what our sister Natalie Yam is doing, that's respectful. She's paving the way for people like us to feel like we can also be heard. We can also share our opinions. So thank you so much. That's so encouraging.